Hello and welcome everyone. This is Taco Movie Talks, joined here with Ethan, and today we have on the docket an episode about none other than Lars von Trier. Ethan, first of all, how are you doing? And how did you discover Lars von Trier?
Hello. I'm doing fine. I'm a bit tired. Uh, but I first got introduced to Lars von Trier when I was just Netflix surfing as a younger boy. And okay, this has gone a little weird, but uh, I discovered Nymphomaniac on Netflix while surfing uh, one day,
As one does.
and yes, and I was like, what is this? And then I heard Chris Stuckman talking about at the time his newest film, The House That Jack Built, and
Mm.
I was like, oh, this guy's a legitimate filmmaker. So yeah, so I looked into his movies, and I've now seen a bunch.
So, time period wise, I don't know how soon after the release of A House That Jack Built or The House That Jack Built I watched it, but that was the film that I was introduced to Von Trier by. I think I've said a few times I'm a big fan of true crime. I kind of really dig serial killer material. Um, and it's not because I have a side room that I do nefarious experiments in. That's not the case.
Mm.
But that movie really was attractive to me because it looked really interesting and it looked like a dark portrayal of that type of film. And when I finally watched it, I was impressed and also kind of taken aback by Von Trier's unique style. That film's certainly one I want to rewatch because as with most unique directors, I think it takes a little while for it to set in. And but it was really good, and then just kind of was off of him for a little while, and then got reintroduced through this episode. I also watched I think it's Elements of Crime. Is that the
Mm.
title?
Yeah.
Which that's another super unique movie. Um, Pretty dang good. But Lars von Trier, what aspects to you, Ethan, really make him stand out as such a unique filmmaker? Because I think he really is unique.
The Depression.
Yeah,
um,
definitely that.
I starting with Melancholia, I've started to dread watching Lars von Trier movies. They are because when you watch one, it's just probably the most one of the most depressing films you will ever watch.
Mm.
Uh, we're not talking about this one, but Dancer in the Dark is one of the most depressing movies that I have ever seen. Um, and these two are also extremely depressing. Not as depressing as that, but strangely enough, though, when he's less depressing, he's not as good. He's not able to take hold of you as much. So I think that's what because that depression is what makes him so unique. Is that he just has this uh very what's the word cynical point of view of the
Mm.
world that just like the films that he makes are just fundamentally depressing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to switch gears just really quickly before kind of speaking to the really good point that you made. Um, Ethan has his own YouTube channel that I hope you check out. He is on the precipice of 100 subscribers. So, one of you lucky fans could be his 100 subscriber. Let's make that happen. Also, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. But to what you just said, Ethan, in doing just a little bit of research, just to learn more about Von Trier as I was watching the movies, one of the headlines jumped out to me. It was that Lars von Trier started drinking again so that he could write the script for a movie he was working on. If that doesn't speak to you on the type of cynical nature of this director, I don't know what does. His films, or the ones I've seen so far, to your point, are certainly just that. Very, very cynical look at different aspects of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think, from your perspective, because I believe you have watched more of his films than me, when it doesn't touch on that nerve, I guess, what are some of the examples of that, where it's a slightly less cynical look, and what your thoughts on those movies were?
Well, I mean, one of the movies that we're going to talk about today, Melancholia, uh, definitely has less of a cynical edge to it. But I'll talk about it when we talk about it. The other two of his movies that I watched are Breaking the Waves and Europa. Europa, I do not remember at all, and Breaking the Waves is also fantastic. I would also consider that better than these two movies that we're talking about.
Okay. And then, because Europa is not the television series, correct? That is a feature length film.
No, yeah, it's a
Okay.
feature length.
Okay. As I know, he's done 2 seasons of, I think, television in his home country of Denmark, I believe. That
The
are
Kingdom, the
okay.
Kingdom,
That's what
yes,
it is. Okay, which are very, very highly praised, and
yeah. It got a third season. Yeah, a third season like
ooh,
last year.
that's awesome. Um, Calls back to when we were doing the Decalogue series and kind of speaking to the notable directors who have had success both on the small screen and the big screen. And we got Kieslowski, uh, David Lynch,
Lynch. Yeah, I was gonna say Lynch.
and the third one is Bergman. I'm sure there's some other examples, but I think you could definitely throw Lars von Trier on there. My
hmm
small sample size, I haven't seen any of the movies that you have said that take preference over these two, but I do believe, in my mind at least, these two films that I saw, I think, are my favorite of Von Trier, of the Von Trier quadruplets that I've seen up until this point.
hmm
And certainly, they're all of them have been very, very unique, though, I have to say.
Yeah, not that. I was I was just making a comparison about Breaking the Waves and Dancer in the Dark. I'm definitely not saying that Dogville and Melancholia don't have merit because I also think they are good movies.
Two quick, I guess, observations I would like to make. I think Von Trier likes blondes. That's the first one. Second one is that, now this might sound pretentious, and if it does, I want you to call it like you see it, Ethan. Just tell me straight up.
Oh, and dude, my I'm far too pretentious to call.
I've heard in interviews and, like, just other literature, how directors speak about, they see life almost as poetry, and the way they depict that on film is like poetry in motion. And, like, a couple examples to just give you some mental vision is like Tarkovsky, obviously, son of a poet. has I think written some poetry himself, and he depicts situations in a really unique way that it's supposed to you're supposed to feel the emotions rather than putting you step for step in a situation that you would feel that emotion. I guess I might have butchered the last half of that, but it's like you the depiction isn't like how you walk down the street and you see a guy that makes you feel scared. It's like he does something euphoric that is supposed to rub off that feeling. And Lynch does that, and I think Von Trier is also someone who does that as well. And it's not repeating these kind of trope scenes is what I'll call it for lack of a better term. It's creating a completely new visual to get across the feeling he wants you to resonate with.
Yes, definitely. I definitely see that.
And I mean, to my knowledge, I don't know if Von Trier would ever describe himself as a poet, but he he is definitely influenced. I know one of his really big influences is Pier Paolo Pasolini. Do you
Mhm.
think that was maybe where he like started to think about how he could portray the emotions he wanted the audience to feel?
Oh yeah, it's an entire possibility. Pasolini is responsible for Salo or 120 Days of Sodom.
Great,
Um,
great date night movie.
yes, for some people, one of the most disturbing movies. So like disturbing on an emotional level too. So it comes as no surprise that he honed a lot of his knowledge of depression and cynicism in film uh, from Pasolini.
Another really fun fact that I heard about Von Trier, and I'm sure Ethan, you are very deep into film, have a deep love for film. That there's this phrase "going Hollywood," which is often depicted as a negative, and they said because Von Trier is, I guess, deeply terrified of flying, that this would never be the case because he would never be able to make it to Hollywood to quote unquote go Hollywood. And I've had lengthy discussions time and time again with both you and Matthew about how the Hollywood system can sometimes sanitize the artistic vision of directors. And that couldn't be further from the truth from what I've seen, at least so far, from Von Trier. First and foremost, I think you and I would both agree his films would be probably. I just don't think on a wide level there would be too many producers that would greenlight his projects despite financial successes he might have had in the past.
What?
He's
You're telling me Nymphomaniac didn't get the big producer credit? Come on.
but the cinematic landscape is ultimately richer because we have someone like a Von Trier. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And taking that a step further, so Pasolini is amongst one of his many inspirations. Um, do you think that there is kind of he's a part of a wave, which we kind of alluded to on our last episode of directors who really push the bounds of what is being put on film, I guess.
hmm
Um,
Um,
one of them is No Way, and after watching these last two films from Von Trier, they are very they touch on those very touchy aspects, but they are vastly, vastly different, as you stated in the last episode, for sure. Because Von Trier definitely has like a darker, actual, like a less bright palette in his films compared to No Way, but also the way things are depicted are completely different too. But they are provocative nonetheless.
Yeah, well, I think the main difference is that Noe is highly stylized.
Mm-hmm.
His
Mm-hmm.
films, he'll just like bathe a scene in a certain color, something like Dario Argento would do.
Yes.
And Von Trier is the complete opposite. He literally formed a cinema movement that would completely strip down, uh, that completely strips down the stylization of film. Uh, his films are completely stripped down in stylization, and they're just extremely raw movies.
Yes. That is. I think you might have uh, inadvertently came up with the title for this episode, Ethan. I think raw, just a raw look at whatever he's trying to depict is the best way to describe a Von Trier movie.
Yes, stripped down and raw.
That's how we like it. Let's starting from the top. The first movie that we watched, as Ethan alluded to previously, is Dogville, which is really unique from the perspective of the whole film kind of being played out on a a set that has the literal, it is stripped down. I mean, there is like the bare minimum on set. There's vehicles, there's like a few pieces of integral buildings, but besides that, everything is kind of chalk outlined, which immediately is different, and
Yeah.
it's a bit of a hook, I think. And before I get too much deeper into the plot, I don't think he did it because of budgetary concerns. I think there was perhaps an artistic reason he did it, and I wanted to try to pick your brain, Ethan, as to why one would do that.
Uh, I I might consider this Von Trier's most ambitious film to date. Honestly, the two films that we're going to talk about are his most ambitious to date, probably.
Mm.
Um, but in the sense that this movie is Von Trier stripping everything away. Like we just said, he's very stripped down and raw, and this is that to the ultimate degree. Now there's not even a world that you could explore. It's just the characters, just the performances, just the story that's laid out right in front of you, and and it's a story that you might be at least semi familiar with, but it's a story that is going to be told in the most stripped down way possible. And I think that's the mindset that Von Trier was in
Mm-hmm.
when he made this movie. Uh, but there is definitely something to it that it adds a little extra cynicism to it.
I I agree with you completely. Um, the simplistic version of the plot that I'm going to try to summarize is Nicole Kidman is fleeing a seemingly dangerous scenario, stumbles upon Dogville, this town, in which one of the central characters she deals with is Thomas Edison Jr., who I immediately recognize because the film starts and you get a bird's eye view of the entire town and the houses are labeled. And I saw that and I thought the character was going to be based off of actual Thomas Edison. And I was like, okay, that's a neat kind of element to this film. it's not, and I think there is a reason he chose that name. That it's like a little tongue-in-cheek moment later on in the film. But anywho, she flees her situation to try to take solace in Dogville, and the town slowly reveals its more nefarious spirit, for to term it. And then we get the very climactic ending that I don't want to spoil just yet, but first and foremost, the using of that name, a very small detail, Ethan, but I think it's one that he alluded to later on, because Thomas Edison Jr. is a writer in the book. He wants to write about Dogville, and Nicole Kidman makes the I think the ironic statement of, why don't you just name the town after the town you live in and name it Dogville? And he says, no, you can't choose a town that people are actually familiar with. It takes them out of the story. Which I thought was like a little wink to the fact that he named a character after a very famous historical figure. Just something I wanted to throw out there. And then also ask you kind of your thoughts on this premise that you said is familiar, but he tells it in his own unique way.
When I say familiar, I mean like it just feels familiar. It's not a story, like an exact story that I've seen before, but it is like it feels like a familiar, simple story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost fairy tale like,
Mm-hmm.
but it slowly turns into something not fairy tale like at all. And so I think that's also that's also a little bit of a merit to having that stripped down soundstage as the setting. And I really enjoyed the progression from like fairy tale like town, warm, comforting town, slowly revealing itself, and it does it in a way that's not like immediate. It's not like a switch that flips. It's a slow progression.
Absolutely. So like the pacing of the arc of the town essentially is really well done, to speak to your point that it's never, there's shocking moments, but they all feel as though you keep building up to expect something worse and worse. And the stripped down nature of the set, I think, is almost, it thematically works with this story, that it slowly exposes the true nature of the people that live there. You know what I mean? So from that perspective, yeah, it feels like, you're getting a true look into the soul of this town, where, whenever you go through any small town, it looks, quaint, and it looks like, oh, this would be a great place to live. And I think the whole purpose of a story like this is that there's a lot that lurks beneath the surface of these small towns everywhere.
Yes, absolutely.
Another thing that I thought was really neat was how he was able to progress the character arcs. And I said it of the town, but that truly speaks to the efficiency of what Von Trier was able to do, because you have, just guesstimating, about a dozen characters that live in this town that Von Trier, through his script, is able to progress all along the lines of kind of, to have you look at them all in a different light, throughout the runtime of this movie, to where you start to see the darker side of each and every one of those characters, which that would be like a lot to balance. I'm sure you can kind of speak to that, Ethan. Even with the script that has a limited amount of characters, creating that arc can be, and pacing it well can be one of the obstacles. So being able to do
Yeah.
it with such a large ensemble cast is really an impressive feat he was able to pull off.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is it's an ensemble. Like you're following all of these characters throughout the story, and you're watching all of their progressions to something more and more callous.
I also I thought the impactful moments of this film were able to be pulled off with great weight. For example, Paul Bellany, who plays Thomas Edison Jr., he is the, I guess, voice of reason. He tries to be the advocate for Nicole Kidman's character and seems like one of the only genuine people in the whole town, especially as the, I guess, atrocities occur. He feels like the person that you can actually rely on as an ally for Nicole Kidman, which is a character you start to really deeply resonate with. And his character arc feels very, very weighty because of how well paced out the kind of reveal that he is no better than anyone else. And on top of that, and I want to get your kind of perspective on that as well, Ethan. On top of that, the SA scenes in this are, it starts out kind of shocking, and then it starts to take its toll on you, the audience member. I guess the way that Von Trier wants you to sense Nicole Kidman's character is feeling, where you're so beaten down by that point that it's not even shocking that it's happening anymore. It's almost expected.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So what? How did you feel about Bellany's character as maybe potentially one of the central villains as we get towards the end, and his character arc?
Um, I think I really like his character
Mm-hmm.
because he really yeah, like you said, he starts off as someone you could trust, someone that Grace can trust, because really you're in Grace's shoes for the entire duration of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Even like when she's not there, you're just watching this town,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you're just kind of kind of and analyzing this town almost. Um, and he, out of all of them, he's the longest. It's it takes him the longest to show his true colors. But once it's revealed, it's truly once it's revealed that he kind of I believe he sacrificed Grace in a way.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of betrayed her. Um, he is now seen as a cowardly scumbag.
And Von Trier, what to you do you think he was kind of trying to get across with this movie? Like what? And I'm sure it's it's multifaceted, but I felt like I came away from this movie with maybe a viewpoint that he was trying to get across, and kind of what viewpoint resonated with you.
I think it's the viewpoint that these people are. isolated. They're in such a small town, and you bring in somebody new, and it's going to almost ignite a certain engine of isolationistic tendencies.
I definitely see
Oh, I
it.
think
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
that's a part of it. Oh, so I was just going to say that's a part of it,
Mm-hmm.
but there's obviously more to this.
And her character, like, she works as both almost a magnet, not a magnet, but an easy victim, for one, that allowed them to get away with their deeper and darker, uh, what's the word, like, wants and needs, almost like
Their desires.
their desires. That's the word. Their dark desires. But at the same time, or not at the same time, later on, she also works as a mirror to show them their innate flaws as this isolated town, because they're so insulated, they almost can't truly do that amongst themselves. It almost takes that outside perspective to show how the system of what their town is flawed.
Yes, definitely. And at the end, when it gets revealed why she ran away, um, it becomes a lot more clear about the themes of the film.
Yes, exactly, and I think she pretty much speaks to them very very clearly, and it touches on really greatly, and this might be another thing that she mentioned, but it definitely resonated with me, and like, people in general handle criticism very differently, and some people are able to handle it with more grace than others, but at a human level, it is hard to take criticism. And oftentimes, if there's an easy way to dismiss criticism, harsh criticism, it's in our human nature to want to deny it. And that is also something that we see really well portrayed after Nicole Kidman speaks to the whole town about all of the bad things that she's experienced. They want to just completely disregard it. And I feel like that is something that is very true, that we don't see played out as black and white, but in our everyday lives we probably see in ourselves and the people around us the want to not fully accept criticism, at least immediately.
Yeah, exactly. That definitely plays a huge part in it as well. Like not willing to accept blame
Mm-hmm.
for your actions.
And you alluded to the ending, Ethan, and would you do the honors of kind of um, summarizing the the story from the action that Paul Bettany takes, which kind of leads us to the climax and beyond?
Um, yeah, so I think what happens is he has the gangsters come up to Dogville to
Mm-hmm.
take her away, and we get the reveal that the boss is Grace's father, and he wants to basically kill the entire town. And Grace is like, probably the line that I didn't like the ending very much, just because it was such a rift in tone. It was kind of funny almost,
Mm-hmm.
just how like dark that ending is. Um, because she says outright, there are many towns in the world and if there's one to be taken out of this world, it's this one. And with that, like the entire town is just decimated, all wiped out, and then she uh shoots she herself shoots Paul Bettany in the back of the head. And I thought that was kind of funny and not really not all that effective for me personally.
Yeah, so just a few things I want to mention. The mob boss and Grace / Nicole Kidman's father cameo by James Caan. That was pretty awesome. Did not expect that
Rest in
whatsoever.
peace.
Yeah, R.I.P. to one of the greats to do it. Also, the blind character, I think it's Ben Gazzara. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but
yeah,
Ben
Gazzara.
Gazzara. There we go. One of the people I've seen a couple movies by prior who had worked in tandem with John Cassavetes. That was neat to see him in this movie. Really great cast, quite honestly. A lot of
Great cast.
Yes. The way I came into that ending, because they teased the destruction of it, and I was like, I had a frothy fury building up in my soul as Nicole Kidman is just getting just the raw end of the deal time and time again. And I'm really starting to hate this town as the movie goes on. And
Yeah.
she's flirting with the idea of kind of letting them off the hook. And I was actually psyched when she was like, burn it to the ground. And I was like, hell yeah. I was so on board with that. I didn't care. Obviously it was very over the top, but I was hook, line, and sinker. Like, yeah, burn the freaking town down. So I was actually, and I don't want people to think I'm sadistic, but yeah, I was very happy that the ending played out like that, because I felt there was a need for a catharsis after she had just been taking lumps throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
But I can totally, I see your perspective from the point that, I mean, that is really, really over the top and just like a complete flip where it's like, okay, because Grace, no pun intended, had, and I don't even know if this is a pun, but she had taken her lumps with a lot of grace. And there came a point where she was looking at it and a realization that, I don't know, maybe it was as the power dynamic flipped, maybe there was a further point being made there where it's like, when you have the power to make these choices, it's easier to let your more your darker desires come to light. But I felt the same way, though, in that it was just desserts. But I guess you could read into it as something that people in power, when you have the power to make more nefarious decisions, you tend to make them more frequently. Perhaps was the point trying to be made.
Yes. I thought the way it went about it was kind of cheesy.
Yeah. I just got so wrapped up into it, and I also I liked that they don't show the dog until the absolute very end, but I did like that the dog lived. Just a little tidbit.
Well, that's Dogville now. It's the Dogville.
That's why they knew this was coming, so they named it Dogville.
And I guess I honestly think that's why it's called Dogville, is because Like it's like a subliminal message that these people are animals.
I could definitely see that. I think Von Trier is someone who likes to throw little nods to stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if that was part of his intention. And also a small little observation that I just thought of is that the dog is the character that gives away Nicole Kidman and reacts to her immediately, I guess the most aggressively, and then the town juxtaposes that to like open arms will, give you refuge. But the dog is also like it showed its true face from the get go. And it wasn't like just suckering her in to further use her. So it's like that in part is why you can't hate the dog and why there's actually like, a bit of joy that it gets to survive, I guess. Maybe I'm
Right.
reading a little bit too much into it, but that's the way that I look at it.
Well, yeah, because it's a dog,
Mm-hmm.
and like while it is a literal animal, it's an innocent and honest creature, whereas the human beings can sometimes be the true animals, hiding their dark id, their dark desires.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning that I feel like you'll definitely have taken notice of because it's on a sound stage and it's stripped down and there's very little actual props to, or I guess like physical structures to interact with. You take notice of the, I guess, sound design a lot more so because, they're pantomiming the opening of doors and whatnot while the noise that you would have syncs up with it. So I took a lot more notice of it, whereas it would just be something that, is just a part of the movie otherwise. And really great sound design, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, definitely. It just brings you into the story without a world.
Mm. Yeah, and that's something that you get used to surprisingly quick. Like it takes something that on paper you would think this is gonna be a hurdle, and this is gonna it could weigh down parts of the movie. It's gonna be something that we're gonna have to work around. Not only do you get used to it so quickly, but it also then begins to work very well for how it's shot and how the story flows. Because you're able to get shots that had you had a fully built up set you really wouldn't be able to get. One of the scenes that comes immediately to mind is the first time Nicole Kidman is graped, which is code for the bad word we can't say on this site,
Hmm.
by Skarsgård's character. And you get it, you get a far away look where the whole town is like just doing their normal actions all the while this terrible assault is taking place. And I'm sure there's a ton of other examples where this was able to be pulled off, but it takes what would be a what you would think would be an obstacle and turns it into a strength that it utilizes throughout the film.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Would you ever think about doing something like as ambitious as this with your sets in the future?
No, probably not. It's just such a unique idea to
Mm-hmm.
do. Um, and yeah, I don't think it. I mean, if the it would all depend on what I would want to do. and I don't want to be exactly like Lars von Trier.
I got you.
So who knows? Who
And,
knows?
and also, like we said, this story, I think, lent itself to that type of, I guess I'll say gimmick, not to like demean it whatsoever, but just for lack of a better term. But this story works really well for that, like plays into the themes, you know.
Yeah.
Now, I don't believe, to my knowledge, you've seen Lars von Trier actually followed this up with a sequel. Were you aware of that?
He did. I knew about that.
And it's the sequel, I think, focuses more so on racism as one of its themes. Not as highly rated on Letterbox, but something else to check out, I guess, if you've seen this film as well and are wanting to see this kind of gimmick expanded upon. But Ethan, I want to ask you, is there anything else that you really wanted to touch upon for the movie Dogville?
Um, Not really. I think we touched upon all the points.
I rated this one a 4 out of 5. I thought it was great. Ethan, how about you? What is your rating for this film?
I also thought it was great, kind of over the top and cheesy ending, but I really enjoyed. I didn't enjoy it. I did not enjoy it. I really appreciate Von Trier's ability to balance all of these characters and create a story without creating a world. Or at least I should say, creating a world with just the characters, which I thought was very impressive. But the ending was not very good.
And I, by no means, I'm not trying to put you on the spot whatsoever, but would you have appreciated if the ending, if it took more time to develop it, or if it wasn't such a drastic turn? Like from your perspective, how do you think it could have been improved upon?
The latter, it's just such a jump to just this entire town being massacred. Um, I don't know how you would end that story. Maybe Von Trier meant it to be kind of a depressing ending, um, but it's I didn't find it depressing at all. I just found it kind of funny, kind of over the top, kind of satisfying as well.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know if that was what Lars was going for.
Let me throw this at you. Had Grace stuck with her initial decision to let the townspeople live, would you have felt better about the ending, or do you think that would have also there's something in between that would have fit better?
I feel like that might have been poised for a potentially good follow. Like it would be poised as a good follow up for a better ending. I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, maybe not. Who knows? But we got the ending. We got what we got. But I don't. I'm not super keen on that original ending, and maybe that would possibly fix it for me.
Mm-hmm.
But for my rating, I also think this movie is great. I give it 4 out of 5 as well.
I'm gonna throw out a potential best of both worlds scenario, and I don't want you to sugarcoat it. If you think it would be a dumb idea, I want you to be honest with me. And I don't. Before I want to preface this with a question because I'm gonna kind of allude to it to give you the idea it stems from. Have you seen "I Stand Alone" by Gaspar Noé?
I have not.
Okay, I'll do my best to explain it without using that as reference. it ends. There's less deliberation between Nicole Kidman and her ultimate decision, and maybe she just immediately says burn it down. We get that, and then flashback to the actual present, and she makes the decision to spare them after the fact. So you get this catharsis, and then there's like a come down where you realize, okay, now we're back to reality, and she makes the tough decision to not get revenge.
Uh, yeah, I feel like that would work. I feel like that would be a little Hollywood-esque,
Mm-hmm.
probably. I think that's the reason why he chose the ending that he did, was because he is so not Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying he's like, I'm not saying he's anti-Hollywood. I'm not saying he's who was it? Robert Altman, as you have graciously titled Robert Altman anti-Hollywood. Um, but he's definitely not like a Hollywood type person. Like I definitely I feel like that is a good and a little more simple idea for a little more simple story. So I absolutely know where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess he just wanted to be so blunt and so uh, horrible. But in doing that, he made something that was over the top and kind of cheesy.
True. True. The next film we have on the docket is Melancholia. This follows the story of Kirsten Dunst, who starts the film about to be married. It's a chaotic day in which we seemingly have her play out very unpredictable actions of someone going through mental distress. And this is followed up with the, I guess, introduction to the main premise, which is a planet by the name of Melancholia, which scientists believe is going to make impact with the Earth, and how that affects Kirsten Dunst's life, or how that affects Kirsten Dunst and also her sister, nephew, and her brother-in-law. Any other major plot points you feel are worth mentioning, Ethan?
Not really. Not really any other plot points. It's again a pretty stripped down movie.
Mm-hmm. The one aspect which was very impressive in general, but also not something I had seen that I can think of off the top of my head, is there's some really great usage of CGI to make the visuals of this planet impacting Earth and coming close to Earth look pretty spectacular. It was something I was not used to seeing in Von Trier, and definitely that alone kind of sets this movie apart from a lot of the other ones I had seen from him.
Yeah, it's definitely his most it's his most epic, and it's tied with Dogville for his most ambitious, because it's like the complete opposite of Dogville. It's pretty stylized for Von Trier, uh, and it works pretty well.
Agreed. Agreed. He's able to capture, especially the absolute beginning of the film. He has some really good shots, and those in particular were the ones that really felt like how the poets in cinema like to depict certain feelings. Shots of Kirsten Dunst with lightning coming out of her fingertips, shots of her sister running across the golf course. They're able to capture these emotions in ways that aren't control. Well, I don't know about not cliche at any point. They seem like very unique shots that were effective.
Hmm.
And I think the premise on its own. Look, we've had a number of apocalyptic movies, end of the world movies like 2012, try to capture something like this. But what really sets it aside is the main character is someone who is going through a very deep and dark depression, and that viewpoint is what makes the movie very interesting to see how that affects her in juxtaposition to the other characters who are on a different point of the spectrum than she is.
Yes. Yeah, it's really interesting to see. I think the psychic nature of her character is a little tapped on, I
Yeah,
found.
I
Um,
agree.
but it was necessary in a way
Mm-hmm.
to have this overwhelming feeling of grief, and that turned into acceptance. Um, I will say, out of all the movies that I've seen, with the exception of Europa, even though I don't even know if that movie is as depressing as any of the others or not. But Melancholia is probably the least depressing Von Trier movie, and I honestly think it suffers because of it.
I I understand. The so I want to talk to the first point you made. I agree. I think it was a bit heavy-handed, and I think there could have been a more subtle approach to, like, I don't think you have to completely scrap that from the movie, but I think the proof is like a bit heavy-handed, as I said. Like, so she alludes to there's like this, these wedding games, and it was count the beans, which when they threw that in at the beginning, I didn't think much of it. I was like, oh, okay. I guess that's to bring us into, they do stuff like this at weddings. And then Kirsten Dunst is like, I knew there was 698 beans in there, and only the sister was told the tally. And it's like, that's supposed to be like, oh, she actually does have this like psychic nature to her. That felt just really, it wasn't nearly as well executed as a lot of other things were in this film.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
for example, if she were to, and I don't know, maybe this would be too heavy-handed towards another aspect of the film, but if Dunst were to say, like, I feel at peace, like the way I feel about what's happening, I've never felt this way, and I know because of that something is happening. This is more than a whatever, a drive by or whatever they call it, when the planet first just kind of flashes by Earth. You know what I'm saying, Ethan? Like, there would have
Yeah,
had to be, without throwing that into the film, a way to depict that.
yeah, absolutely. Um, uh, I really like the way that um, denial is depicted
Mm,
in this movie. Like, I just you on also using the internet as a way of just showing this matter of fact like paranoia turned into panic. I think is really well done. That's the best part of the movie, in my opinion.
I agree, and also having, like, I don't know if it's worldwide, power outages, but that also works super super well because I think had at least the sister character been able to be on the internet the whole time and looking into it, that would have that obsession would have completely cannibalized other aspects that needed to be addressed in this movie, or it would have taken on a completely new skin had you been able to look into it. So it takes what could have been a potential something that would have absorbed much of the plot and being able to take that out reasonably through the script, something that is a natural explanation, was also a really good idea too.
Yeah, definitely.
To me, Kirsten Dunst's character is very nihilistic and obviously depressed, like beyond, almost beyond clinical depression, a major, severely clinically depressed. And I also think that other characters are symbolic of emotions or character traits as well. And I felt like the sister is, she personifies anxiety fairly well. Maybe the father slash husband to the sister slash brother-in-law, he's one of the best examples of denial and maybe even hubris to more pinpoint where he's at. And then the son character feels like a good depiction of naivety or innocence. Do any of those depictions, or I guess titles, labels, resonate with you, and would you change any of those?
Yeah, I feel that it just represents humanity's reaction to something like
That. Another one of my favorite aspects of the film is how it's not like this big grandiose like the world is ending type of thing, like a 2012 or a Day After Tomorrow, or really anything Roland Emmerich has ever made. Instead, it's just this isolated family dealing with it in all of their separate ways.
And I also, so you get the, coming into this movie, you are probably privy to the information. At least I was. I don't know about people who saw this movie in theaters, but you see the description and you realize that an end is the likely outcome. But I do enjoy that this movie makes the reveal after the wedding, because it allows you to kind of look through a different lens at how Kirsten Dunst was reacting on her wedding night, because she was unpredictable, to say the least. At least during the wedding, at least.
Yeah.
She immediately cheats on her husband. That's got to be close to the record for time span between tying the knot and having an affair. And then you kind of get her reaction towards her boss, which makes a whole hell of a lot more sense towards the end. I mean, do you think this was her, going through the stages of grief in her own way?
Yeah, I definitely believe that. Like when you understand that she knew about this before anybody else, it's just prime. It's just it all becomes so clear.
Mm-hmm. And something I'm gonna make two observations from the film. very specific lines that kind of lead me to question, and I want to get your perspective on it. The first being that there's discussion of Kirsten Dunst's character being sick, and the first question is, do you think this is a character who has been like a clinically depressed character before she's ever introduced to us through the movie? And the second question that I want, well, I'll let you answer the first question first.
Sorry, repeat the question again.
So they said she's sick, right? But
Yeah.
we only have knowledge of her in the timeline of like the crash being imminent and her probably knowing it at this point. Do you think she is someone who lived her life with depression, or that she had just started her grieving process before it was known to everyone else?
Could be either. And that's kind of the ambiguity of her psychic abilities, and which is not necessarily a good thing. Like, it's just there for a reason. I don't know what that's supposed to emphasize when she's able to have psychic abilities and thus experiences things before others can. So I'm just not super sure. But I really loved Kirsten Dunst in this movie.
She nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
She was amazing.
What was your second question?
I'm gonna be honest with you, Ethan. I forgot what the second question was, but the one thing that I will say is I took for granted the aspect of her, being able to tell the future in my viewing, and latched on more so that she was, in a depression. And that was the aspect that made the movie land really well with me, because it was as though people who have such severe depression are almost able to take solace in knowing that there is an end in sight. And I don't know if that's something that, if you would look at it through the same lens, but that was the way that I looked at it, and it was able to give her this. She was almost able to walk without the weight that she had been carrying before, and that's why she was able to act the most accepting of it in comparison to the people around her. And I thought that was the very interesting aspect to it. But now, I guess you could look at it through a completely different lens with the knowledge of her having this knowledge before everyone else.
Yeah, well, I definitely know why it's there. I completely understand. I don't understand why it's there. I can understand why it's there, but I just don't. I can't understand how it's there, like in context to the story.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Um, it's just it's really, it is well written, and I think it takes it's a simplistic plot, simple enough to where you can immediately tell someone and they kind of understand the stakes. In a couple minutes you could really inform someone everything they need to know about this movie. But the fleshing out of everything and giving depictions of the stages of grief is really well done. I like when movies are able to do stuff like that. And it's like on a much smaller scale. The way that Kieslowski was able to depict the Ten Commandments, I felt like Von Trier was able to kind of nail stages of grief through the characters of this film.
Yeah, like a process.
Um,
Yeah.
Aside from the CGI and Kirsten Dunst's wonderful performance, are there any aspects of this film that stick out to you as well?
Uh, Probably the well, I mean, the character work stands out. We've really talked about like the characters really stand out as interesting. It's a very well written film. Um, oh yes, another aspect that sticks out to me is the consistent use of. I'm not exactly sure what classical piece of classical music it is, but it is used throughout the film quite a bit. Um, it's by Richard Wagner. I believe it's called Tristan Isolde, and I think it. I don't know if it works. I don't know.
I gotcha. So you're slightly torn between. Um, are you leaning more towards you didn't like it, or you kind of felt it worked in some times and others it didn't?
I'm leaning more towards I like it
I
because
gotcha.
it almost had a feeling of like of space, and it kind of reminded me of 2001: A Space Odyssey,
Mm.
and it kind of reminded me that this is basically Lars von Trier's 2001: A Space Odyssey because, in the sense that it's his most grandeur and epic in scale.
I certainly agree with this. That of all of his films, this feels way just it's larger than life. You know, it really
Yeah.
succeeds from that aspect, and I totally see the comparison for Lars von Trier of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Um, and I don't know about you. I think it's just because my exposure to Kirsten Dunst was, I think, only the Spider-Man films, but I was I was blown away by her. I mean, were you surprised by how well she was able to pull this off?
Yeah, I mean, she can definitely act. I probably the only other good performance I've seen her in is Power of the Dog, 2 years ago, and yeah, she did very good in that movie. But I really think this is her best performance.
I agree.
I definitely think the way that she transcends like
That grief and acceptance is really well done.
From an emotional standpoint, as a viewer, how emotionally invested were you in this film? Speaking from personal experience, for a large part, I was actually, and this speaks to the strength of her acting. I was getting almost frustrated with her character. I was getting upset with the way she was acting, and after the film took place, I was like, man, she was able to take me on a ride with her. Did you feel similarly? Were you kind of having this emotional, I guess, aggravation or attachment in any way to this film?
Yeah, um, there's definitely a sense of like paranoia with the characters that I feel. Um, like the world-ending prophecies like that is something that terrifies me already. Not that a planet's going to collide with Earth tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, apparently, it's not going to happen for at least the next 25, 30 million years. So, yeah, there's probably no, there's probably It's an irrational fear. It's an imaginary fear, but it's something that scares me a bit. And using that in combination with how the characters react, I definitely felt an attachment to this movie on an emotional level.
Yeah, and I I remember I had a science teacher in junior high, and he would, I think he took great pleasure in like every week showing us whether it be like an episode from a TV series or whatever about all the uh, world-ending cataclysms that could take place that would, like I said, end the world. So I think, there's super volcanoes and stuff, so we might not be out of the woods as far as world ending, but like you said, it probably won't be a planet, but you never know. Could be a volcano, could be a great freeze, anything. And I'm just messing with you, Ethan. I'm
Yeah,
sorry
yeah.
to try to put you on
I
edge.
was like, I was like, what? The Great Freeze?
But yeah, I mean, and it's despite us as people never living through something that is this grand a scale, it is something that we can put ourselves in the shoes of, like seemingly easy.
Yeah.
Because there's the existentialism that we all live with, that our world could end at any moment. So it's already kind of baked in our psyches, and it's not a huge stretch for us to think that when our world ends, I mean, it's the same as the world ending when you die, in a sense. I mean, there's peace in the knowledge that your loved ones will live on, but for you, the world, it kind of ends when you pass away. So it's like,
Mhm.
it's something that it's not a huge stretch to think, okay, what if everything ended, including my world and everyone else's? So
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's neat to see it done this well. And for your, I guess your perspective, is this the best you have seen it done? I think you may have said that it was.
Um, I don't know what I would compare it to as far as, well, it's better than anything Roland Emmerich has made. Um, I didn't love it,
Mm-hmm.
but I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask you your rating before we get there. Anything you uh, want to mention beforehand?
Um, really like the performances, really like the story. Definitely an accurate depiction of the grieving process. Um, kind of weird blunders here and there, but overall, thought it was really good. I give it a 3.5 out of 5.
I'm close there with you. I give it a 4 out of 5. I did think it was great. Kirsten Dunst's performance really is standout for not only her career but even in this movie, which has some talent for sure. And it was really neat to get to see some high level CGI utilized and pulled off really really well in a Lars von Trier movie.
Yeah.
And I doubt he'll ever have another movie that has it as this large of an aspect. And it's not even the film, for the majority, it doesn't lean on this a lot, but just because of his style, he generally doesn't have any CGI. So I think this is always going to be a film that is unique amongst his catalog for that very reason.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is all from us. Ethan has a YouTube channel that I alluded to previously. He has David Lynch Ranked. He has his analysis of Chinatown. and also a video that you should be on the lookout for. He discussed what it is going to be about with me prior to our recording. I'm not going to spoil it by any means, so you should subscribe, ring the bell on his channel so that you are notified when it comes out, because I think you're going to greatly enjoy it. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Ethan, again, thank you very much for joining me, man. This was a fun conversation about a unique and interesting director.
My pleasure, of course.
That's all from us. We'll catch y'all on the flippity floop. Bye, guys.